Welcome, dear traveller, to this place of deep rest and ancient whispers, where the story of creation unfolds like soft petals opening to the dawn, where time itself slows to the rhythm of your breathing, and where the mysteries of long ago blend with the peaceful darkness that surrounds you now. Let yourself settle into this moment, into the comfort of wherever you rest, feeling the weight of your body supported completely, feeling the gentle rise and fall of your breath, that most ancient rhythm that connects you to all living things, to the first breath ever drawn, to the beginning of everything. There is nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to do, only this soft journey into story and sleep, into the warm embrace of forgotten times, when gods walked between rivers and shaped life from clay and water. When the world was young and every possibility floated like morning mist across pristine gardens. Allow your eyes to grow heavy if they haven't closed already. Allow your jaw to soften, your shoulders to release their tension, your hands to rest with palms open, receiving the gift of this story, this ancient gift that has travelled across thousands of years to reach you here in this quiet moment of surrender to rest. Before the world held the shape we know, before cities rose from plains or mountains wore their crowns of snow, there existed realms of pure potential, spaces between earth and heaven where divine beings moved with purpose, as gentle as starlight, as patient as stone. Among these beings, in those unimaginably distant times, there was one whose wisdom flowed like the deepest rivers, whose understanding of life and its mysteries ran as clear and constant as the sweetest springs. His name was Enki, and he dwelled in the Abzu, that sacred realm of primordial waters beneath the earth, where fresh water gathered in infinite stillness, where knowledge itself seemed to pool and deepen in the cool darkness, where the secrets of existence rested like smooth stones on a riverbed, waiting to be discovered by patient hands. Enki was the keeper of these waters, the guardian of wisdom, the one who understood the patterns woven into existence, the sacred geometries that would one day bloom into life. His presence in the Abzu was like moonlight on still water, illuminating without disturbing, revealing without demanding, simply being there in the eternal now of that sacred space. The Abzu was not merely a place, but a state of being, a dimension where the waters that would nourish all earthly life gathered in their purest form, untouched by the sun's warmth, holding within their depths every possibility, every potential pattern of growth and becoming. Imagine these waters if you can, though imagination can barely touch their essence. Waters so clear they seemed like liquid light, so still they reflected not just surfaces, but the very nature of things, so deep they had no bottom but simply faded into mystery. In this realm of pristine water, Enki moved with the grace of currents themselves, understanding the language of flow and stillness, knowing how water could nurture and shape, how it could carry life within its embrace, how it could be the medium through which divine intention became tangible reality. He would spend ages simply being with the water, feeling its coolness against his eternal form, listening to the silence that was somehow also the source of all sound, observing the perfect stillness that contained all movement. This was his meditation, his home, his temple, and from this place of absolute peace, the impulse toward creation would eventually arise like a gentle spring bubbling up from hidden depths. Time in the realm of the divine moved differently than time as we know it now, or perhaps it didn't move at all, but simply existed in an eternal present, where past and future were only different ways of looking at the same infinite moment. Enki could have remained in the Abzu forever, content in that perfect stillness, but within the divine nature there existed something else, something that might be called love, though that word barely captures its depth and breadth. It was a love that desired expression, that wanted to see itself reflected in new forms, that longed to nurture and watch unfold, that found joy in the act of creation not for power or glory, but simply for the beauty of bringing forth life. This love stirred in Enki like warmth spreading through water, gentle and unstoppable, a call from the deepest part of his being towards something new, something that would be both of him and beyond him, something that would walk the earth and know the joy of existence in its most vivid, most immediate forms. The thought of creation began to form in his mind like a dream taking shape, becoming clearer and more defined with each passing eon, until it was no longer just a thought but a vision, and no longer just a vision but a promise, a commitment to bring forth life in a new way. Above the Abzu, The earth lay waiting, pristine and untouched in ways that perhaps even the gods themselves didn't fully understand yet. The land held potential in every grain of soil, in every stone and river valley, in every place where water met earth and created that sacred mixture that could hold form and yet remain soft, that could be shaped and yet had its own integrity. The rivers of earth were fed by the waters of the Abzu, flowing up through hidden channels, emerging as springs and streams that wandered across the landscape like seeking fingers, finding their way to the lowest places, creating arteries of life across the fertile plains between the great rivers that would one day be called Tigris and Euphrates, though in that ancient time they had other names, or perhaps no names at all, for naming belongs to those who would come later, to those who were not yet dreamed into being. Along these rivers, clay accumulated in deep beds, formed from the slow weathering of mountains, carried grain by grain through countless cycles of rain and flow, settling in layers that held within them the memory of stone and the adaptability of water. This clay was perfect, though none yet knew for what purpose it waited. Enki rose from the Abzu one day, or perhaps it was no single day but a gradual emergence that took ages, ascending from the realm of deep waters into the air and light of the upper world. The transition would have been like moving from dream to waking, from meditation to action, from pure potential into manifestation. He walked the earth with feet that left no trace, observing the play of light on water, the way reeds grew in perfect stillness at the water's edge, the way birds that already existed, for there were creatures before humanity, the earth was not empty but simply waiting, moved across the sky in patterns that mirrored the stars. He came to the banks of a great river, where the clay lay thick and rich, where the water lapped gently at the shore in rhythms older than counting, where the sun touched the earth with warmth that spoke of endless patience and nurturing care. Here, Enki knelt beside the river, his divine hands hovering over the clay, feeling the potential that hummed within it, sensing the way earth and water had already begun the work of combination, how they had mixed and merged and waited for precisely this moment, for the touch of divine intention that would transform them from simple matter into the vessel of consciousness itself. The act of reaching down and gathering clay into his hands was the first gesture of creation, the moment when thought became action, when vision began its journey into reality. Enki's hands closed around a portion of clay, feeling its cool dampness, its yielding texture, its readiness to receive form. The clay seemed to welcome his touch, as if it had been waiting exactly for this, as if all the eons of weathering and washing and settling had been in preparation for this sacred moment. He lifted the clay and felt its weight, substantial and real, grounding the vision in the physical world, anchoring divine imagination to Earth's matter. The clay was neither too wet nor too dry, but held that perfect balance where it could be shaped without falling apart, where it maintained integrity while accepting new form, where the union of earth and water had created something greater than either element alone. In his hands the clay began to warm, taking on the heat of divine purpose, beginning the transformation that would carry it from mere substance into something infinitely more precious. But Enki did not work alone in this great undertaking, for creation at this level required the balance of different wisdoms, different aspects of divine understanding. He was joined by Ninhursag, the great mother goddess, whose understanding of birth and growth, of nurturing and patience, of the slow unfolding of life's patterns, was as deep as Enki's understanding of form and structure. Together they embodied the complementary forces that would be necessary to bring forth humanity, the knowing and the nurturing, the forming and the quickening, the spark of consciousness and the warmth of care. Ninhursag approached across the garden that grew beside the river, her presence like the arrival of spring itself, like the first warm day after winter when buds begin to swell and the earth exhales its long-held breath. She knelt beside Enki at the river's edge, and the two divine beings regarded the clay together, their minds joining in shared purpose, their understanding flowing between them without need for words. For at that level of existence, thought and intention moved directly from consciousness to consciousness, unmediated by the crude tools of language that would come later. That would be one of humanity's gifts and burdens both. Together they began to work the clay, their four hands moving in gentle coordination, shaping and smoothing, adding water when the clay grew too stiff, allowing it to dry slightly when it became too fluid, finding that perfect consistency through touch and intuition, through trial and deepening understanding. The process was not hurried, for divine time had no deadlines, no urgency beyond the steady pull of purpose itself. They worked through what might have been days or years or ages, the distinction meaningless in that space of pure creative focus. Their hands moved slowly, mindfully, each gesture deliberate and filled with care, each addition of water or clay chosen for its rightness, its fit within the larger pattern they were bringing forth. The form began to emerge gradually from their efforts, not appearing suddenly but growing the way a plant grows, the way a river finds its course, through countless small changes that accumulate into something recognizable, something that carried intention forward into manifestation. The clay under their hands began to suggest a figure, began to hold the shape of something that had never existed before, something that would walk upright between earth and sky, that would use hands as they were using hands now, that would look upon the world through eyes and know wonder and joy and the deep satisfaction of existence. The shaping of the first human form was an act of art more profound than any art that would come after, for it was the original template, the first poem written in matter itself, the foundational story from which all human stories would eventually flow. Enki and Ninhursag shaped limbs that could reach and grasp, that could climb and build and embrace, that could express through gesture the feelings of the heart. They formed a torso that could house vital organs, that miraculous collection of lungs and heart and stomach and liver that would process air and food and water into the energy of living. They shaped a spine that would hold the body upright, that would allow this being to stand and see far across the landscape, that would carry within its protected channel the pathways of nerves connecting mind to body, intention to action, thought to movement. And most carefully of all, they shaped the head, that sacred vessel that would contain the brain, that remarkable organ that even they, in their divine wisdom, approached with something like awe, for consciousness itself would dwell there, and consciousness was the greatest mystery even to gods. That strange light that illuminates experience from within, that knows itself knowing, that transforms mere existence into lived experience. The face they formed held spaces for eyes that would see sunlight dancing on water, for a nose that would smell flowers blooming in the garden, for a mouth that would taste ripe fruit and speak words and form sounds into songs. Ears they shaped to hear the wind in the reeds, the laughter of children not yet born, the stories that would be passed from generation to generation, carrying forward the memory of these very moments. Every detail received their attention, from the curve of fingers that would hold tools and the hands of children, to the arch of feet that would walk countless miles across the earth's face, to the subtle hollows and swells that made the form beautiful in its functionality, graceful in its strength. They worked with infinite patience, stepping back to observe, returning to adjust, refining and smoothing, until the figure that lay before them on the riverbank seemed not just a form of clay, but something waiting, something on the threshold of becoming, something that already somehow possessed dignity and presence even in its stillness. When the form was complete in its shaping, Enki and Ninhursag regarded their work in a silence that held all the weight of what they had done and what was yet to come. The clay figure lay motionless in the soft light, surrounded by the reeds and flowers of the riverbank, cradled by the earth from which it had been formed. It was beautiful in its simplicity, perfect in its potential, and yet it was still only clay, still only matter shaped by intention, but not yet awakened to consciousness, not yet enlivened by the spark that would transform it from object to being, from thing to person, from form to life itself. The next step required something beyond physical shaping, something more mysterious and profound even than the remarkable work they had already accomplished. They would need to breathe into this clay the essence of life itself, to kindle within it the fire of consciousness, to open doorways within its brain and heart that would allow the divine to flow into it and remain there, sustained and self-maintaining, capable of growth and change and experience. This was the moment that all previous moments had been leading toward, the instant when potential would collapse into actuality, when possibility would become presence. Enki leaned close to the clay figure's face, his divine essence gathering into a breath that carried within it something of the Abzu's waters, something of the eternal wisdom that flowed through all things, something of his own consciousness that would seed consciousness in this new being. He breathed into the nostrils he had formed, and the breath entered the clay body like light entering a window, filling it from within, travelling through the passages that would become airways, spreading into the spaces that would hold lungs, infusing every cell and fibre with the golden energy of life force. The clay began to change even as the breath entered it, the transformation rippling outward from the core, the grey-brown clay taking on subtle tones of flesh, of living tissue, of skin that could feel and respond and heal. Ninhursag placed her hands upon the figure's chest, above where the heart lay dormant, and from her hands flowed warmth and the pulse of maternal love, the force that nurtures and sustains, that wants growth and flourishing, that sees potential and helps it unfold. Under her hands the heart began to beat, slowly at first, finding its rhythm, establishing the pattern that would continue for a lifetime, that drumbeat that announces presence, that says I am, I live, I exist here in this body in this moment. The awakening was gentle, gradual, like dawn spreading across the sky rather than a lightning strike. The chest began to rise and fall as lungs filled and emptied, drawing in air, beginning the endless exchange with the world that would sustain life. Blood began to flow through forming vessels, carrying nutrients and oxygen, removing waste, establishing the cycles that would maintain this miraculous balance called health. Nerves fired for the first time, creating pathways of sensation and response, building the complex networks that would allow thought and feeling and action. And somewhere in the depths of the forming brain, consciousness flickered into being like a candle lit in darkness, a point of awareness that looked out at the world through closed eyelids, that felt the warmth of divine hands still resting on clay-turned flesh, that heard the gentle sounds of river and wind and divine voices speaking words of welcome and blessing. The first human lay there on the riverbank, eyes still closed, experiencing existence for the first time, overwhelmed perhaps by the sheer intensity of sensation, the rush of input from eyes and ears and skin and nose and mouth, the strange feeling of having a body, of being located in space, of being separate from the world and yet connected to it through every breath and touch. When the eyes finally opened, they saw the faces of Enki and Ninhursag, leaning over with expressions of joy and welcome and pride in their creation, saw the blue sky beyond them dotted with clouds that drifted in peaceful procession, saw the green reeds and the glint of sunlight on water, saw colour and light and form for the first time, and understood none of it yet, only received it in wonder, in a state of pure experience before concepts and categories, before knowing the names of things or understanding their relationships, simply seeing and being amazed. The gods helped the first human to sit up, supporting the body that had not yet learned balance or coordination, steadying the head that wobbled on a neck unaccustomed to its weight. Everything was new, every sensation unprecedented, every moment a revelation. The feeling of air entering lungs, the sound of breathing, the touch of hands helping and guiding, the warmth of sun on skin, the smell of river water and clay and growing things, the taste of air itself sweet and clean in the mouth. All of this flooded consciousness in an overwhelming cascade of experience that would slowly sort itself into understanding as the brain learned its work of making sense of sensation, of organizing chaos into pattern, of transforming raw experience into knowledge. The gods spoke to their creation in tones of infinite gentleness, using words that seemed to bypass understanding and touch something deeper, some intuitive level where meaning resided before language. They told the first human not to be afraid, that this world was home, that the garden around them was given freely, that the rivers would provide water and the earth would provide food, that the sun would warm and the night would cool, that seasons would turn in their endless cycle, and within that cycle life would flourish and be sustained. They taught the first human to stand, supporting each attempt, celebrating each success, patient through every stumble and fall, as muscles learned their work and balance became established. Standing upright for the first time, the first human looked across the garden and saw its beauty, saw the lush growth of plants and trees, saw flowers blooming in colours that had no names yet, saw the river flowing eternal and calm, saw the vast sky and felt the smallness and vastness of being simultaneously, felt the wonder of existing here in this particular body in this particular place at this particular moment, that was also eternal, also representative of all moments, also touching the infinite even in its specificity. The garden where this awakening took place was not like gardens that would come later, cultivated and controlled, but was something more primal, more wild in its abundance, more generous in its giving. It grew along the riverbanks where water was plentiful and soil was rich, where the meeting of earth and water created conditions perfect for life to explode in verdant profusion. Trees grew tall and strong, their branches heavy with fruits of every kind, their leaves providing shade and shelter, their roots drinking deep from the waters that flowed both on the surface and beneath, in hidden channels connected to the Abzu. Between the trees, flowering plants bloomed in endless succession, so that something was always flowering, always offering colour and scent to the warm air, always providing nectar for bees that hummed their ancient songs of labour and transformation. Vines climbed and cascaded, their fruits hanging in reach, their new growth constantly pushing toward light. Herbs grew in fragrant patches, their leaves ready to flavour and heal, their roots holding properties that would be discovered gradually over time as humanity learned the lore of plants and their generous gifts. The river itself flowed through the garden like a liquid path, its waters clear enough to see the smooth stones on its bottom, cool enough to refresh but not so cold as to shock, deep enough to swim in some places while shallow enough to wade across in others. Fish moved through the water in silver flashes, their scales catching sunlight, their bodies writing momentary calligraphy on the surface as they jumped and played. Birds came to the river's edge to drink and bathe, their songs adding music to the constant gentle voice of flowing water, their bright feathers adding colour to the green and brown of the bank. Butterflies moved from flower to flower on wings that seemed too delicate for flight, yet carried them effortlessly on the warm air currents that rose from sun-heated earth. Everything in the garden existed in a state of harmony, predator and prey not yet defined in those harsh terms, but simply living side by side in the abundance that required no competition, no struggle, no conflict beyond the gentle contest of plants for sunlight and water, a contest that was more cooperation than war, for even shade-loving plants thrived under the canopy created by their sun-loving neighbours. Into this paradise the first human walked on unsteady legs, guided by the gods who had given life and form, learning with each step how to inhabit a body, how to move through space, how to reach out and touch the bark of trees and feel its roughness, how to cup hands and lift water to lips and drink, and feel the coolness spreading through throat and belly, how to pluck fruit and bite into its sweetness, and understand taste and nourishment and pleasure all at once. Every action was a discovery, every sensation a teaching, every moment an expansion of understanding. The gods watched their creation explore the garden with expressions of deep satisfaction, seeing the success of their work not just in the physical perfection of the body they had formed, but in the spark of curiosity and wonder that animated it, in the quick learning and adaptation that showed the consciousness within was strong and capable, in the joy that seemed to shine from the first human's face like light from an inner sun. Ninhursag showed the first human which plants were good to eat, which fruits were ripe and ready, which roots could be dug and cleaned and enjoyed. She demonstrated how to gather seeds and nuts, how to find the hidden treasures that plants offered to those who looked carefully and approached with respect. She taught the proper ways to take from the garden, never stripping a plant bare, always leaving enough for regrowth, always thanking the plant for its gift, always understanding that this abundance was a relationship, a reciprocity, a sacred exchange between life forms that depended on each other in ways that would become clearer over time. The first human learned quickly, watching with complete attention, imitating the actions of the goddess, beginning to develop the capacities for memory and learning and practical intelligence that would define the species, that would allow humans to thrive in countless environments, to solve problems and adapt and create and transform the world in ways both beautiful and terrible, though in that innocent beginning, only the beautiful seemed possible. Enki taught the first human about water, about the sacred nature of the rivers and springs, about how water connected all things, flowing from the Abzu through hidden channels to emerge in springs and wells, flowing across the surface in rivers and streams, rising into the air as mist and clouds, falling again as rain to begin the cycle anew. He explained that water was life itself, that the body was mostly water, that water carried nutrients and washed away impurities, that water was to be honoured and protected and never wasted or fouled. He showed the first human how to read the river, how to see where it was deep and where shallow, where it flowed swift and where it pooled in calm eddies, where fish gathered and where crossing was safe. He demonstrated how to drink from cupped hands, how to splash water on face and body for refreshment, how to swim by moving arms and legs in coordination, how to float by relaxing and trusting the water to hold up the body that was less dense than the depths below. The first human took to water like returning to the womb, feeling some ancient memory in the cells of floating in amniotic fluid, of being held suspended in liquid warmth, and swimming became not just a skill, but a joy, a return to origins, a reminder of the Abzu from which ultimately all life had emerged. As day faded into evening and the sun descended toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple that reflected in the river's surface like an artist's palette spilled across water, the gods prepared a resting place for their creation. They gathered soft grasses and fragrant leaves, piling them into a bed beneath a tree whose branches spread wide overhead, creating a canopy that would shelter from dew and provide a sense of enclosure, of safety, of being held by the world itself. They showed the first human how to lie down on this bed, how to arrange the body for comfort, how to allow muscles to relax and release the day's efforts, how to close eyes and let consciousness drift into the restorative darkness of sleep. The transition from waking to sleeping was another revelation, another new experience in a day filled with firsts, the strange sensation of awareness fading, of thoughts becoming dreamlike and disconnected, of slipping away from the world while somehow knowing that the world would still be there upon returning. The gods kept watch through that first night, sitting nearby while the first human slept, listening to the deep breathing that signaled the body's rest, ensuring that this precious new life remained safe and undisturbed, marveling at what they had accomplished, at the miracle of consciousness they had kindled, at the long future that stretched ahead for this being and all who would come after. Morning arrived with birdsong and golden light filtering through leaves, with the smell of dew-wet earth and flowers opening to receive the sun, with warmth spreading across the world as the great celestial fire climbed into the eastern sky. The first human woke slowly, emerging from sleep and dreams into the reality of the garden, remembering in stages where they were and what had happened, understanding with new clarity that yesterday had been the first day and this was the second, that time was moving forward, that life was unfolding, that existence meant experiencing one moment after another in an endless succession of nows. The gods were there upon waking, greeting their creation with gentle voices, offering water and fruit for the first morning meal, beginning the day's teachings and explorations. This pattern would continue for many days, each day bringing new lessons and discoveries, each day expanding the first human's understanding of the world and their place in it, each day building skills and knowledge and confidence in inhabiting the form that had been given. But the gods understood that one human alone would experience a loneliness that could not be filled by divine companionship, for the gods were different in nature, vast in consciousness, unable to fully relate as equals to the small, concentrated awareness of a human being. They knew that their creation needed companionship of its own kind, needed someone with whom to share the joys of the garden, with whom to walk and talk and laugh and sleep beside in the darkness, with whom to build a life that would extend beyond individual experience into relationship and family and community. And so they returned to the riverbank, to the place where clay and water met, and they began the work of creation again, forming another body from the same sacred materials, shaping arms and legs and torso and head with the same care and attention they had brought to the first human, breathing life and consciousness into clay, awakening another being to join the first in the paradise of the garden. And when this second human opened eyes and saw the world for the first time, saw the gods leaning over with faces full of love, saw the first human standing nearby with an expression of wonder and recognition, something new entered the world, something the gods themselves could observe but not fully share. The particular joy and completion that comes from seeing another of your own kind, from knowing you are not alone in your experience, from having someone who understands without explanation, because they share your form and nature and way of being in the world. The two humans regarded each other with a curiosity mixed with something deeper, some instinctive understanding that they belonged together, that they complemented and completed each other, that together they were more than either could be alone. They approached each other slowly, each step tentative, until they stood close enough to touch, and when their hands met, both smiled without knowing they were smiling, without understanding yet what a smile meant, simply allowing the joy they felt to reshape their faces into that universal expression of happiness that would cross all languages and cultures throughout all the ages to come. The gods brought them together under a tree whose branches formed a natural bower, whose blossoms fell like snow around them, and there spoke to them of their purpose and their promise. They explained that humans were made to live in relationship, to care for each other and for the world, to grow in wisdom and understanding, to cultivate the garden and enjoy its abundance, to honour the earth and water that sustained them, to remember always the divine source from which they had come, and to which they would eventually return, for even then, even in that moment of innocent beginning, there was understanding that individual forms were temporary, that bodies would age and eventually cease, but that consciousness itself was eternal, part of the great cycle of being that moved from divine source into manifestation, and back again in waves that had no beginning and would have no end. The gods taught the two humans how to build a shelter, weaving branches and palm fronds into a structure that would protect from sun and rain, creating a space that was theirs, a first home in the garden that was already home. They showed them how to make fire by striking stones together, catching the spark in dry moss, feeding it with small sticks until flames grew, explaining that fire was another gift, a piece of the sun brought down to earth, useful for warmth and light and transforming raw food into something more digestible, but also dangerous, needing respect and careful tending, never to be left unattended, always to be properly extinguished before sleep. They taught them to recognize the patterns of the sky, how the sun moved from east to west marking the passage of day, how the moon waxed and waned in its monthly cycle, how stars wheeled overhead in their fixed patterns that told the seasons and could guide travellers who ventured far from home. They taught them the names of things, and with each name came understanding, came the ability to think about and discuss and remember, for language was perhaps the greatest gift after consciousness itself, the tool that would allow humans to share experience, to pass knowledge from one to another and from one generation to the next, to create culture and story and the vast edifice of civilization that would eventually rise from these humble beginnings beside the river. Days flowed into weeks and weeks into months as the two humans grew in skill and understanding, as they learned the rhythms of the garden and made themselves at home in its bounty, as they discovered their own capacities and limits, as they learned to work together in cooperation and care. They gathered food and prepared it together, shared the work of maintaining their shelter and keeping their fire, explored the extent of the garden, and came to know its every corner and feature, learned the habits of the animals with whom they shared the space, began to shape their environment in small ways, creating paths through repeated walking, clearing areas around their shelter, planting seeds from fruits they had eaten and watching with wonder as new plants sprouted and grew, discovering that they could participate in creation, that they could work with the earth to increase abundance and beauty. The gods visited less frequently as the humans became more independent, trusting them to manage their own lives, watching from a distance with approval and occasional intervention when teaching was needed or danger threatened, but mostly stepping back to allow their creations to develop autonomy, to make choices, to learn from consequences, to grow into the fullness of their human potential. In the cool evenings when the heat of day had passed and the air filled with the sounds of crickets and frogs, the two humans would sit together by their fire and talk about the day's experiences, about what they had seen and done and learned, about their plans for tomorrow, about their questions and wonderings regarding the nature of things. They developed between them an intimacy of knowing and being known, of sharing thoughts and feelings, of offering comfort and encouragement, of celebrating joys and supporting through difficulties, of learning the dance of relationship with all its rewards and challenges. They learned to read each other's moods and needs, to speak and to listen, to give and to receive, to maintain their individual selfhood while also creating something shared, something that was neither one nor the other but both together, that mysterious union that would be the foundation of family and community and all human social life. And in the fullness of time, when the seasons had turned several times and the garden had shown all its faces from the lush abundance of growing season to the quieter beauty of dormancy and renewal, they came together in the most intimate union, And from that union, life generated life. Consciousness gave birth to consciousness, and the first child was conceived in the garden that had been prepared for humanity's flourishing. The pregnancy was a time of wonder and careful tending, as the woman's body underwent its miraculous transformation, creating within itself a space for new life, nourishing and protecting and growing another human being from a single joined cell. Ninhursag returned during this time to guide and teach, to explain what was happening and what would happen, to prepare the woman for birth and both parents for the responsibilities of caring for an infant. She showed them how to prepare soft clothes from plant fibers, how to create a cradle that would rock gently and keep the baby safe, how to gather the herbs and foods that would nourish a nursing mother, how to be patient and gentle and attentive to the needs of one who would enter the world completely helpless and dependent. When the time came for birth, Ninhursag was there to assist, to ease the pain as much as possible, while explaining that pain was part of the process, part of the great work of bringing forth life, something to be breathed through and accepted as the price and proof of creation. The labour was long but successful, and when the first child born of human parents entered the world with a cry that announced their arrival, when the parents held their baby for the first time and looked down at the tiny face and perfect fingers and toes, they understood something of what the gods had felt when looking upon the first humans, the overwhelming love, the sense of responsibility, the determination to protect and nurture, the awe at having participated in the creation of consciousness, the hope for all that this new being might become. The baby grew as babies do, passing through stages of development that recapitulated in accelerated form the journey of humanity itself, learning to focus eyes and recognize faces, to reach out and grasp, to roll over and sit up and crawl and eventually walk upright, to make sounds that gradually shape themselves into words, to engage with the world in ever more complex ways. The parents learned patience and sleep deprivation, learned to interpret cries and needs, learned to keep the baby safe while also allowing exploration, learned to teach by example and gentle correction, learned that raising a child was perhaps the greatest work they would ever do, more important than any other accomplishment or achievement. The gods watched this new phase of human existence with satisfaction, seeing that their creation was capable not just of survival, but of transmission, of passing on life and knowledge, of creating continuity across generations, of building toward a future that would extend far beyond any individual lifetime. More children followed, born at intervals that allowed each to receive the attention and care they needed, growing up together in the garden that remained abundant and generous, learning from their parents and from the world around them, developing personalities and preferences and particular skills, becoming individuals while also remaining connected by bonds of family and shared experience. The garden began to feel populated now, to ring with children's voices and laughter, to show the signs of young humans learning and exploring and sometimes making mistakes that required correction or repair. The original shelter expanded into several dwellings as the family grew, creating a small compound, a village in miniature, a first suggestion of the communities that would eventually dot the landscape. The gods had explained to the first humans that their children would eventually grow and leave to establish their own homes, that they should teach them everything they knew and then release them with blessing to find their own paths, and when that time came, it was both sad and joyous, both loss and fulfillment, both ending and beginning as all significant transitions are. The children walked out from the garden into the wider world, carrying with them the knowledge and skills they had learned, carrying also the stories of their origins, of Enki and Ninhursag, of the sacred clay and the breath of life, of the Abzu's deep waters and the gift of consciousness, of the responsibility to honour and care for the earth and all its creatures. They found new places to settle, new river valleys and gardens waiting for human habitation, new opportunities to apply their ingenuity and labour. They formed partnerships and had children of their own, and those children had children, and the human population began to spread across the fertile lands. Not yet numerous enough to strain the earth's resources, but growing steadily, establishing patterns of life that worked in harmony with natural cycles, learning regional variations and adapting to different environments, developing different languages and customs while retaining core understandings that connected them to their origins and to each other. The gods continued to watch and occasionally intervene, sending teachers in times of need, appearing in dreams to offer guidance, ensuring that the essential knowledge of right living was not lost, even as human society grew more complex. They saw humans develop agriculture, moving beyond simple gathering to deliberately planting and harvesting, creating surplus that could support larger populations and allow some individuals to specialize in skills beyond food production. Potters and weavers and builders, and eventually scribes who could record knowledge in marks on clay tablets, creating memory that could extend beyond individual lifetimes, creating history and literature, and the accumulated wisdom that would build into civilization. The gods saw humans create art, painting on cave walls and pottery, shaping clay into figures, making music with instruments carved from wood and bone, expressing through creative work something of the divine spark that animated them, participating in creation as they had been created, making beauty for its own sake, for the joy and satisfaction it brought, for the way it connected maker and viewer and listener to something larger than the individual experience. But the gods also saw that as human numbers grew and societies became more complex, new challenges emerged. They saw conflict arise over resources and territory, saw the emergence of hierarchy and inequality, saw some humans beginning to dominate and exploit others, saw the innocent harmony of the garden giving way to the complicated and often painful dynamics of civilization. They saw humans forget sometimes their divine origins, forget the sacred nature of earth and water and all living things, begin to treat the world as merely resource, rather than relationship, begin to value accumulation over balance, power over wisdom, individual gain over collective good. These developments brought sadness to the divine observers, for they saw that the consciousness they had gifted carried within it the capacity for both great good and terrible harm, that free will meant the freedom to choose wrongly as well as rightly, that the very intelligence and creativity that allowed humans to thrive also enabled them to destroy and damage and cause suffering. Yet despite these troubling developments, the gods did not abandon humanity or regret their creation. They understood that growth involves mistakes, that learning requires failure, that consciousness emerging into freedom would necessarily stumble and err before finding wisdom. They continued to work through inspired individuals, through those who maintained connection to the sacred, through dreams and visions and the still small voice of conscience that spoke in every heart, if only humans would listen. They established temples where humans could come to honor the divine source, to remember their origins, to receive teaching and blessing, to participate in rituals that connected them to the eternal patterns that underlay the temporary chaos of human affairs. These temples became centers of learning and culture, places where scribes preserved knowledge, where priests studied the stars and seasons, where healers learned the properties of plants, where the stories of origins were told and retold to each new generation, ensuring that the memory of Enki and Ninhursag, of the Abzu and the sacred clay, of the breath of life and the gift of consciousness remained alive in human awareness. The story of creation became central to human identity, a reminder of where they came from and who they truly were beneath the masks and roles and social constructs that civilization imposed. When humans felt lost or confused, when suffering seemed unbearable or life seemed meaningless, they could return to this story and remember that they were made by divine hands with love and care, that consciousness itself was a gift and life was sacred, that their true nature was not separate from but connected to all creation, that they carried within them something of the divine and were capable of divine action, of creation and compassion, of wisdom and love, of beauty and truth. The story gave meaning and dignity, gave context and belonging, gave hope that despite all evidence to the contrary, the fundamental nature of existence was good, that love was at the heart of things, that the gods who made humanity wanted human flourishing and would never completely withdraw their care and guidance. Time flowed on like the rivers that had witnessed humanity's beginning, carrying human generations forward into an ever-expanding future, carrying empires and ages, triumphs and disasters, works of genius and acts of horror, the full spectrum of human possibility playing out across the stage of history. The garden where the first humans had awakened became a memory, then a story, then a myth, then something some dismissed as mere legend, though others kept faith with the ancient truth it contained, understanding that mythic truth is deeper than historical fact, that what is eternally true is more real than what merely happened once in time and place. The languages changed and multiplied. The customs evolved and diversified, The technologies advanced from stone to bronze to iron to steel to silicon. But beneath all the surface changes, humans remained what they had always been. Clay animated by divine breath. Earth lifted into consciousness. Matter made aware of itself. The universe coming to know itself through countless individual perspectives, each one unique and irreplaceable, each one a variation on the original theme of creation. And still the rivers flow as they flowed in the beginning, rising from hidden springs that tap the deep waters, carrying sediment and life down from the mountains to the plains, creating fertile valleys where life can flourish, offering their gifts to all who approach with respect and need. Still, the clay waits along the riverbanks, that sacred mixture of earth and water, and sometimes children find it and play with it. Shaping figures without knowing, they recapitulate the divine work of their origins, forming crude dolls and animals with innocent hands, learning through play what their distant ancestors learned through divine teaching. That clay can be shaped, that intention can become form, that creation is possible, that something new can come into being through imagination and effort and care. Still, the sun rises and sets, marking the days that accumulate into lives. And still consciousness awakens each morning to find itself embodied, located in space and time, connected to all things yet experiencing itself as distinct, able to observe and choose and act and love and wonder at the strange miracle of existence. The gods are still present, though perhaps less visible than in that ancient time, working through more subtle means, through the promptings of conscience and the stirrings of compassion, through beauty that stops the breath and truth that rings clear in the heart, through love that connects and heals and transforms, through the endless creativity that flows through human minds and hands when they open themselves to inspiration, through the deep wisdom that emerges when humans quiet their surface minds and listen to the stillness beneath thought, that stillness that connects to the Abzu, to the source, to the ground of being from which all things arise and to which all things return. Enki's wisdom is still available to those who seek it, present in the patterns of nature waiting to be observed and understood, present in the solutions that arise when problems are approached with patience and careful thought, present in the technologies that work with, rather than against natural processes, present in the understanding that everything is connected, and actions ripple outward in ways that require responsibility and care. Ninhursag's nurturing presence is still felt by those who tend and care, by parents raising children and farmers cultivating crops and healers, treating illness, and teachers shaping minds and all who work to support life's flourishing, by those who see potential in others and help it develop, by those who create spaces where growth is possible, by those who love with the patient, persistent love that allows others to become fully themselves. The story continues. The great story of consciousness exploring itself through the vehicle of human experience, learning and growing and occasionally remembering its divine origins, its sacred nature, its participation in the ongoing creation of the world. Each human life is a chapter in this story, a unique perspective contributing to the whole, a particular way of being conscious that has never existed before and will never exist again, irreplaceable and precious beyond measure. And though individual lives are brief, consciousness itself is eternal, part of the great cycle of being that has no beginning or end, only endless transformation, only the eternal now continually refreshing itself, only the one life living itself through countless forms, only love knowing itself through relationship and separation and reunion, only the divine exploring its own nature through the experience of limitation and particularity that embodiment provides. As you rest here now listening to these ancient words, you are part of this story, a continuation of the creative work that began in the garden beside the river, when God shaped clay with loving hands and breathed consciousness into matter. You carry in your body the memory of that first clay, the minerals and molecules that compose your flesh drawn from the earth, just as surely as that first body was drawn from the riverbank. You carry in your lungs the memory of that first breath, the air you breathe now descended in an unbroken chain from the air that filled those first lungs and established the rhythm of breathing that continues in you. You carry in your consciousness the memory of that first awakening, the spark that was kindled then still burning in you, looking out through your eyes at the world, experiencing the miracle of existence, capable of wonder and joy and love and all the rich complexity of human experience. You are ancient and new simultaneously, carrying forward a story billions of years old, while also being absolutely unique, absolutely unprecedented, absolutely yourself in ways that no one else can be. Let yourself rest deeply in this knowledge. Let it settle into your bones and blood and breath, this understanding that you are both creation and creator, both formed and forming, both receiving life and giving it, both part of the great pattern and also completely individual, both wave and ocean, both unique and universal. Let your breathing slow and deepen, matching the ancient rhythm that was established at creation, that steady in and out that connects you to all living things, that marks your participation in the great exchange between inner and outer, between self and world, between the limited and the infinite. Feel your body relaxing more completely with each breath, releasing tension and thought and the concerns of the day, returning to the simple presence that was there at the beginning, that pure awareness that exists before and beneath all the layers of identity and story and role that have accumulated over your lifetime. You are not those layers, not fundamentally, not at the deepest level. You are the awareness itself, the consciousness that observes, the presence that exists prior to all form and content, the divine spark that was breathed into clay and will never be extinguished, though forms may change and bodies may eventually return to earth. Imagine, if you will, the garden where it all began. That paradise beside the river where the first humans awakened to consciousness and life. Imagine walking there now in this moment, your feet pressing into soft earth, the smell of flowers and water and growing things filling your nostrils, the sound of birdsong and flowing water and wind in the reeds surrounding you like music. Imagine approaching the river and kneeling at its edge, looking down into water so clear you can see every stone on the bottom, so still it reflects your face like a mirror. Imagine cupping your hands and lifting water to your lips, drinking deeply of that sweet coolness, feeling it flow down your throat and into your belly, nourishing and refreshing, connecting you to the source of all water, to the Abzu itself, to the deep underground ocean from which all springs and rivers flow. Imagine lying down on the riverbank in soft grass, feeling the earth beneath you solid and supportive, feeling the sun warming your skin, feeling the air moving gently across your face, feeling completely safe and held and at home in this place that was made for you, that welcomes you, that has been waiting for your return since the very beginning. The gods are there with you, in this imagining, though perhaps you don't see them directly, perhaps they're present more as feeling than form, as a sense of being loved and watched over and cared for by presences vast and benevolent, by the consciousness that formed you and sustains you and will never abandon you no matter how far you might wander or how lost you might feel. They are reminding you without words that you belong here, that you have a place in the great pattern, that your life matters and has meaning and purpose even when you cannot see it clearly, that the struggle and suffering and confusion you sometimes experience are not evidence of abandonment, but part of the process of growth, part of consciousness learning and evolving through direct experience, part of the divine exploring itself through your particular perspective and journey. They are reminding you to be gentle with yourself, to treat yourself with the same care and patience they showed to the first humans, to honor your body as sacred clay animated by divine breath, to trust your consciousness as a spark of the eternal flame, to remember that you are always connected to the source even when you feel most alone. Rest now in the Garden of Origins, in the place before time began its forward march, in the eternal present where creation is always happening, where the divine is always breathing life into form, where consciousness is always awakening to itself with fresh wonder and joy. Rest in the arms of the earth that formed you, in the embrace of the water that nourishes you, in the warmth of the sun that sustains all life, in the vastness of the sky that holds all things in its blue embrace. Rest in the knowledge that you are loved beyond measure, valued beyond price, held in existence by a care that will never fail, connected to a source that is inexhaustible, part of a story that is still being written, still unfolding, still revealing new dimensions of meaning and beauty and truth. Rest knowing that sleep itself is a return to the Abzu, a nightly dissolution of the separate self back into the waters of pure being, remembering of your true nature as consciousness itself temporarily dreaming itself as human, temporarily experiencing limitation, so that it might know more fully what it is to be conscious, to be aware, to be alive. The story of creation is also the story of return, For what was formed from clay and water will eventually return to clay and water. What was breathed into life will eventually breathe out for the last time and release back to the source. What was awakened to individual consciousness will eventually merge back into the great consciousness from which all individual consciousnesses arise. This is not something to fear, but something to trust, for it is the completion of a cycle, the fulfillment of a pattern, the return home after a long journey of exploration and experience. The gods who formed you with such care will receive you back with equal care, will welcome you as a parent welcomes home a beloved child after a day of adventure, will celebrate all you learned and experienced and became during your time in form, will hold you in the peace that surpasses understanding while you rest from the work of being human, and will perhaps one day breathe you forth again into new form, new life, new adventures in consciousness, for the divine play of creation is endless, and consciousness is inexhaustible, and there is always more to experience and learn and become. But that is for the future, for the unknown tomorrow, that will take care of itself when it arrives. For now, in this present moment, you're alive in your body, breathing this breath, experiencing this night, resting in this place, listening to this story that connects you to your origins and your essence. For now, it is enough to simply be here, to exist without striving or achieving, to rest without guilt or anxiety, to allow yourself to simply be the consciousness that you are, experiencing the miracle of existence with gratitude and wonder. For now, let the story of creation remind you of your own sacredness, your own participation in the divine, your own capacity for wisdom and compassion and love. For now, let the image of the garden comfort you with its beauty and abundance, with its promise that you are provided for, that your needs are known and met, that you walk through life held and sustained by forces greater than yourself, forces that want your good, that celebrate your existence, that love you simply because you are. The river continues to flow, as it has flowed since the beginning, carrying water from the Abzu to the world above, carrying nutrients and life to all the lands it touches, creating arteries of fertility across the landscape, supporting countless beings in their lives and journeys, never running dry, never failing in its patient work of nourishing and sustaining and connecting. You are like that river, consciousness flowing from the divine source through your particular form, carrying wisdom and love and creativity into the world, touching other lives in ways you may never fully know, creating ripples that extend far beyond your individual awareness, participating in the great work of creation by simply being yourself, by showing up each day, by doing what is before you to do, by loving as you are able to love, by learning and growing and struggling and persisting and resting when rest is needed. You are both the river and what the river carries, both the flow and what flows within it, both the vessel and what fills the vessel, both unique and universal, both limited and infinite, both human and divine, both separate and connected, both yourself alone and also part of everything, part of the great web of being that includes all humans who have ever lived and all who will ever live, all creatures who share the earth with you, all plants that green the world and feed you, all bacteria and fungi that break down and build up, all atoms and molecules that cycle through forms, all consciousness that looks out through countless eyes and knows itself in endless variations. Sleep approaches now, or perhaps has already arrived while you've been listening. That gentle dissolution of waking awareness into the dream world, into the place where the rules are different, where time and space become fluid, where the boundaries of self soften and allow deeper truths to emerge, where the unconscious mind processes and integrates the day's experiences, where healing happens at levels too deep for conscious awareness, where you return nightly to the source of all dreaming, to the collective unconscious that holds the myths and symbols and patterns shared by all humanity, to the Abzu in its psychological dimension, the deep waters of the psyche from which insights and creativity and intuition arise like springs bubbling up from underground. Trust this process of sleeping and dreaming. Trust your psyche to know what it needs. Trust your body to do its work of repair and renewal. Trust consciousness to take care of itself in ways that your waking mind cannot manage or control. Let yourself go into sleep as completely as the first humans let themselves go into that first sleep, with trust and innocence, without resistance or anxiety, simply allowing the natural cycle to take you where you need to go. The gods are with you still, as they have always been, as they will always be, watching over your sleep as they watched over that first human's first sleep, ensuring your safety, blessing your rest, sending dreams that teach and heal and guide, preparing you for tomorrow's awakening when consciousness will once again arise into form, and you will open your eyes to another day, another opportunity to be alive and aware and participating in creation. But tomorrow is not here yet. Tomorrow is still potential, still unformed, still waiting in the future that does not exist except as imagination and possibility. All that exists is now, this present moment, and in this moment there is only rest, only release, only the gentle letting go of all that burdens and constrains, only the peace that comes when effort ceases and being itself is enough, only the quiet joy of existing without purpose or goal, only the deep satisfaction of consciousness resting in itself, only the return to the source, the merging with the waters of the Abzu, the dissolution of separate self into the ocean of being from which all selves arise like waves that rise and fall, but are never separate from the water that forms them. You are that water, eternal and ever-changing, ancient beyond counting and fresh as morning dew, holding within you all that has been and all that will be, existing before time and beyond time, the ground of all being, the substance of all existence, consciousness itself in its pure form before it takes on the limitations and perspectives of individual embodiment. Rest in this knowing, rest as this knowing, rest beyond knowing in the simple presence that needs no thought or understanding to exist, that is prior to all concepts and categories, that simply is, always has been, always will be, unchanging in its essence even as it plays through infinite forms and experiences, the one manifesting as many, the eternal entering time, the infinite experiencing limit, the divine knowing itself through the extraordinary adventure of being you, of living your life, of seeing through your eyes, of feeling through your heart, of thinking through your mind, of being exactly where you are and who you are in this unrepeatable moment. Sleep now, dear one, sleep deeply and peacefully, sleep without worry or fear, sleep held in the arms of the earth that formed you and the love that sustains you and the consciousness that animates you. Sleep and dream the dreams you need to dream, learn the lessons you need to learn, heal the wounds you need to heal, integrate the experiences you need to integrate, become who you are becoming through the mysterious alchemy of sleep and darkness and letting go. Sleep knowing that morning will come as it always comes, that you will wake as you always wake, that life will continue its unfolding as it always continues, that you are part of an ancient pattern that includes all humans who have ever rested and slept and dreamed, all the way back to those first sleepers in the garden beside the river, all the way back to the clay given form and the breath given life, and the consciousness awakened to experience the gift of existence. The story has been told, the ancient secrets shared, the journey made from the Abzu to the garden, from the divine hands that shaped clay to the human hands that shaped the world, from the breath of the gods to the breath that rises and falls in your chest even now, even as you drift deeper into rest, even as awareness softens and fades and transforms into something else, something that cannot be named or described but only experienced, only known in the way that sleep is known, in the way that peace is known, in the way that home is known, when you finally arrive after a long journey, when you finally stop and rest and allow yourself to simply be, to exist without effort or intention, to float in the waters of pure being like the first humans floating in the river, trusting the water to hold them up, trusting life to carry them forward, trusting the gods who made them to care for them always, in waking and sleeping, in living and dying, in form and formlessness, in time and beyond time, in the garden and in the world. Beyond the garden, in the beginning and in the ending that is also always a new beginning, in the eternal cycle of creation and return, creation and return, creation and return, breathing in and breathing out, waking and sleeping, being and becoming, resting now, resting deeply, resting completely, resting in the peace that was there at creation and will be there at the end and is here now in this moment. This eternal moment, this now that contains all nows, this presence that holds all things, this consciousness that witnesses everything and judges nothing, and simply loves without condition or limit, loves you exactly as you are, loves you home to yourself, loves you into the sleep you need, loves you through the night and into the morning and through all the days of your life, loves you from the beginning that has no beginning to the ending that has no end, loves you as only the divine can love, completely, perfectly, forever, now and always, as the river flows and the clay rests and the breath moves and consciousness knows itself in the extraordinary miracle of being you, being here, being now, being at all, being forever held in the gentle hands that shaped you and the loving heart that dreams you into existence moment by moment, breath by breath, heartbeat by heartbeat, now and always, forever and ever, resting, 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 peace, peace, peace.